big sky, big potential. In association with Mills and Reeve, this is Eastern Promise. Achieving more together. Welcome to the podcast that's looking to the bright, brilliant future of the East of England. Together we'll explore the ideas, places and ambitions shaping this region for the better and showing real Eastern promise. I'm your host, Mike Rigby, and this week I'm chatting with Shiv Malik, 50% of the originating force behind Forest City 1. I'll be asking Shiv about the origin story for this bold vision, which isn't simply posing big questions about the nature of growth, the enabling power of scale, and the sort of places we want to call home. It's also offering an answer. So join Shiv and me on location at Hatfield Forest in Essex to learn more about this new concept for placemaking on this week's Eastern Promise.
There are plenty of win-wins. That is the nature of good economics, and trading means that actually both parties win. It's not supposed to be a zero-sum game, i.e. if I'm getting something, you're losing something.
Shiv Malik, Chief Executive of ACDC and co-founder of the Forest City 1 project. Now, before we begin, a brief disclaimer. You may have seen that Forest City 1 has proved somewhat controversial. Indeed, several people have kindly and clearly, with the best of intentions, cautioned Eastern Promise against giving this project airtime. I am truly grateful to them for caring enough about this show to contact me and express their concerns. And, you know, in some ways, I do see their point. Mind you, I do think there's value in looking at the Forest City 1 proposal on its own terms, both in the context of the problems it's aiming to solve and in the way it proposes to solve them. So, that's what I'm going to do. Let's get into it. It is an absolute pleasure and a delight, genuinely, to be here at Hatfield Forest in Essex with Shiv Malik, who is one of the two leaders behind the Forest City 1 proposal. Shiv, welcome to Eastern Promise. One absolute pleasure to have you with us.
No, I mean, the pleasure's all mine, and thank you for suggesting that instead of being stuck in a stuffy studio somewhere, that we come to Hatfield. It's an extraordinary place. It's, what is it, about 1,000 acres, and you can hear sort of a profusion of bird sounds. We're not very far from Stansted Airport. In fact, I just saw a plane off in the distance.
Right, yeah.
But you can't, it seems like the airport's just a world away. And where are we? We're sitting on the edge of a lake here.
Yeah.
And we've got this extraordinary shell house, just about 20 metres away. What built in, I think I'm only telling you what I read just now, but built in 1750 or so, by the Hublon family. And they used it as a kind of a pleasure grotto.
A pleasure... Well, yeah. Would that we all had a pleasure grotto?
That sounds
That's what I'm missing. Yes, yeah. I know. Tell us about Shiv Malik and how you sort of your career and how you've sort of come to this point where you are advocating really a transformational project for not just the East of England, not just Cambridge, but the UK economy writ large.
Okay, so I'll give you a little potted bio first, and then specifically the journey to this. So I've been, for a large part of my career, an investigative journalist. I started in 2004-05. I did a bit of war reporting out in Afghanistan and Pakistan for the New Statesman magazine, and then spent my time, large part of it then 6 years working for The Guardian. And I had these two hats on. One was on British Islamism and extremism and digging into the events of July 7th and the July 7th bombings and then what would subsequently happen with ISIS and people travelling off there to fight for that group. And it also meant I at one point was digging up secret documents from terrorists, but also speaking to Al-Qaeda members out in Jordan. So it was all kind of, it's fascinating stuff and really at the front lines of, I guess, it feels like a completely different world now. But, that was the forefront of what was going on in terms of, security and threats, etc., etc. The other hat was economics. And that really started from being a good journalist, just observing what was around me and going, hang on, it's weird. All my friends seem to be doing things a lot later than my parents did, whether it's kind of get a job or feel that they were in a solid career or buying a home or getting married or having children. It was when I was 28, 29 and, my mother had me when she was 20, so really quite young. Yeah. But the average age, you could kind of look back at the stats and that's what I started doing. I'm like, okay, well, is this just anecdotal or is there some merit to it? And that eventually became a book called Jilted Generation. And the thesis of that was simply, hang on, life is being delayed. That's not a choice, because a lot of people at the time, this is now 2010, said, oh, don't worry, this is just young people being younger for longer, right? It's a lifestyle choice and they'll all settle down, it's okay. And I'm like, it's not. Like, these people want to make, my friends, my peers, are not able to make the same choices that their own parents once were able to, i.e. to buy a home, for example. And that book basically warned, if we don't produce more homes, if we don't build as many homes as we once used to, and we don't give young people the same advantages we once used to, and we don't do infrastructure, then our country will rapidly decline. Not just in terms of the living standards for young people, but actually the whole economy will be entirely affected. The driving force of any economy is actually youngish adults becoming and maturing through that life cycle and buying things and saving and paying off debts and moving forward, right? That is the engine of an economy. So that was 2010. Now, to bring it to this, it's really, I guess, a failure of me and maybe my co-author and other people to actually not just make the case, because everyone, I think now, unfortunately, just accepts that writ large, like, oh yeah, sure, young people are going to have a bit of a miserable life, isn't that a shame? But actually implement the solutions. So that really is, that's that part of that journey. I mean, I guess it's just my mentality. I was born in America. I didn't live there for very long, but I'm totally, I feel like, otherwise enculturated to be British. But maybe there's just a little modicum. I mean, I remember living in LA, which is where we lived. And, these big houses, expansive, but also people are just very optimistic, right? And it's a very can-do attitude. And we live in especially pessimistic times now, where, people will say almost off the bat instantly as a fear response, they'll go, oh, we can't build HS2, we can't solve the potholes, how are we supposed to do anything, right? So that's the kind of constant attitude. But actually, when you really sort of try and, when you put your mind to it, you realize actually there is this, instead of arguing about, let's take, increase taxes, redistribute here, or let's throw people out of the country and maybe we'll have more money. You're like, no, there are plenty of win-wins. That is the nature of good economics. And trading means that actually both parties win. It's not supposed to be a zero-sum game, i.e. if I'm getting something, you're losing something. So the whole premise of it is massively optimistic. It is that quote, right? You've got to start somewhere. It's not going to be perfect, and that's okay, because we'll move forward and we'll make it better. And more than that, and we'll end up with win-wins for everyone. And one of the, for example, we're trying to reconcile here. It was one of the first tasks that I thought, okay, well, how do you reconcile the needs of nature with the needs of human beings? Right? It's done appallingly badly to the point where we end up with a bat tunnel that does nothing for humans and nothing for bats.
Right. Yeah, that's just it really says a bureaucratic solution cooked up somewhere by somebody that says, that's ticked a box, move on.
Exactly, and that's just stupid. And so if you're willing to kind of just actually step outside of the bureaucratic set of boxes that are there and go, let's just think this afresh and not be worried about whether everyone goes, oh, that's technically not feasible because it's not, the requirements on section sub, B part X, Y, and Z aren't being met, right? So let's just move aside. Let's just think afresh. And then you realise, actually, all of this is eminently feasible and possible. What is Forest City? 45,000 acres, as you said, it's big. That amounts to about 400,000 homes in all. Obviously, it's going to get built over a 30-plus year period or so. But it does, in fact, yes, if you take that kind of bird's eye view, bring all of that kind of infrastructure, housing and commerce and bring it into one area. But it's situated between Newmarket and Haverhill. It's basically on the other side of the Greenbelt to Cambridge. So you're not building on the Greenbelt as such, but it is, and you can't escape this. This is a very rural area. It's about 8,000 people who live there currently. So it's actually, compared to everywhere else, very underpopulated, which is, I think, a good thing, because if you're going to do building like this, you want to be able to compensate people and give them due recompense for what will inevitably happen, which is obviously building. And that's, in the very least, very disturbing. And obviously people like a rural life and have chosen to live in a rural area and don't want to live in a city. So we can come back to that as well. But that it comes with, I think, the 12,000 acres of woodland. So we're sitting here now in Hatfield. And it would look pretty much exactly like this. That's what we've described in our report. This is a great exemplar of that, right? So what is it? It's not just a Thetford-style bunch of pine trees. It is small areas of wood mixed with meadow, mixed with marsh, rewilded in effect with all sorts of natural elements that would have otherwise existed had we not farmers not wiped them out, right? Everything from beavers to bison. So it's got this. It would be England's largest nature reserve on land. That's contiguous. Yeah. So, and it doesn't just sit as a donut around the city. If you look at the map on the report, you'll see how it kind of wends and winds its way like a tendril, or sets of tendrils around, all of the sort of plots for residential and commerce and etc. So it's really infused quite deeply into its own self-conception of what it should be, right, as in a forest city. The homes. What we said is, we want a 4-bedroom house to be sold for, and therefore cost less than this to build, £350,000, which is considerably lower than Cambridge. But you get a sense, therefore, that it's not a luxury development. It is meant for people who want to, as I said, live a better life and raise a family, right? So it's got to be affordable. How do you then pay for what would be around 43 billion pounds worth of infrastructure as costed at the moment? And that bill will certainly go up, hopefully not by much. And the answer is through a central business district, right? And that's where, if you want, there will be lots of ambition and tall buildings, et cetera, and allow Cambridge to, sort of some of Cambridge, which isn't just research-based if you want, but all those prospering new businesses and very well-established ones to expand and feel that sense of ambition. So that's where they will hopefully move to. It's around 2 square miles. And then finally you get that railway. So just to speak just briefly on the transport, the idea is to double track Cambridge to Newmarket and then draw that line down, which would also connect to the East-West Rail, which currently goes up to Fulbourn, which is on the Greenbelt, the turning circle. We basically take that line further into the heart of Forest City, and then down into Haverhill, which doesn't currently have a train station, 30,000 people.
I see that the people of Haverhill are quite excited at the prospect of being connected.
Yes, some of them are, yeah. And then down into Stansted, where we are now, and then to London. So that's it. So that's that whole picture of the city and what it is.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. And as a huge fan of and regular user of the rail network, I'm all in favour of that. So talk to me about, you've mentioned the Invisible Fabric and the Community Land Trust. Now, my experience so far of talking about Community Land Trust has been the good people of Swaffham Prior, who, as you may know, have taken the step to take the whole village off oil and install a district heating system, which is one of the things we looked at our sandbox. Is this a solution? Because it certainly sounds like a great solution. In the present time, they've had a rush of demand to join the district heating system, which has been possible through the CLT. But that's for them. Tell us about your proposals here, because they're, in terms of ownership, it's really an interesting model.
Yeah, it's, again, it's trying to take us out of that zero-sum game as well, right? So where lots of people on the left go, oh, we should nationalise this, we should nationalise that. What does that mean? It means taking money from the public person, basically spending money on taking out of the private sector, but you don't get anything more at the end of it. It's the same stuff you're left with. It's just transferring the ownership, right? That may improve or may not improve. Let's be agnostic about that, but that's all you're doing. When you get to build stuff anew, you get to reset the terms, and the costs of that are a hell of a lot lower, right? So people also go, why don't you just regenerate that area or this area, etc., etc. And the answer is because it's really expensive. It's really expensive to do that stuff. Or if you want to, again, do stuff like district heating, well, retrofitting that stuff is insanely expensive. And so building anew offers a huge opportunity to say, okay, well, who does own the reservoir, which I didn't speak about, it's 1,600 acre reservoir as a lake at the centre of the city. Who owns that, right? If we're going to build it, well, who should own it, right? Maybe we lease it to, say, Anglian Water, but who owns we want to, having conversations with people in the kind of small modular reactor world, well, who would own that? Birmingham, places like that used to own their own gas and water. Yeah. That makes sense, right? Yeah. Like, great. This is, so if we're starting anew, great. Who owns this stuff? Specifically on the housing, the Community Land Trust, that is actually, you're trying to solve a problem here, which is if we sell a house for £350,000, equivalent in Cambridge is £1 million, well, what are people going to do? Within 5 minutes, you're going to have people buying those houses and then flipping them, putting them on the open market and going, oh my God, I've just banked 600 grand. And they'll just keep doing that again ad infinitum, and that's not really solving any problem there for longer than 5 minutes. And people will get very rich, and undeservedly so, one could say. So the Community Land Trust basically says, no, hang on, you can't do that. You've got to sell it back to the city, right? Because we want that discount to be passed down. Now, that can't continue forever, and eventually have to equivalize with market prices. But the question then becomes, well, how long? How long is long? Is it 30 years? Is it 70 years? Is it 150 years? We haven't worked that out yet. That might be so, but given its size, we're going to have to equivalize. We can't. But all this stuff stems from much earlier conceptions. So technically, CLTs are from America, but that's just the legal framework. The idea is from Bourneville, right? That is, and I say to people, I'm like, do you know about Bourneville? And they go, oh yeah, I do. Oh, it's that Quaker place. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's what we would want to be. They're like, oh, you should call it Quaker City. So have all these fascinating, interesting discussions.
But then people turn up looking for oats. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, yeah. But that's it's a very old English idea that somehow you can change the economic system. Thatcher did it with right to buy, right? Like, let's change the economics of housing. Disagree or agree, that's what she did. Yeah. But we've been experimenting with this for centuries, going back to at least Robert Owen, if not before that. So this is just the 21st century version of that.
What gave you kind of that boldness of vision to say, no, we got to go all in? or it's not worth doing at all. And if we, half measures just ain't going to cut it. What gave you the kind of the bold vision? Is it the thing you were referencing earlier around your experience with your friends, perhaps?
Okay, so Joe Reeve is my co-founder, and yes, he is sort of famous now for saying you can just do things. In fact, I saw him on a stage about a year and a half ago saying exactly that, and also saying, look, the cavalry isn't coming, we are the cavalry. And that made me snap, right? After all this time I'd spend writing and campaigning and, going off to, the Sydney Opera House and speaking in Australia about all of these problems, nothing had really changed. In fact, things had got worse. And I just thought, no one's going to solve this except for us, right? We're just going to have to do it ourselves. This whole thing is incredibly upsetting, watching these very small tragedies play out, week after week, month after month. My peers just leaving, my sisters, my cousins. I thought all our kids would grow up together. They're all spread around the world now, in America, Germany, other parts of the UK. All my friend group, they've all been dispersed, right? It's just this complete breakdown of community and a sense of hope, right? So that's the kind of background to this. That's what propels me every morning and makes me wake up, right? Because I'm like, look, it just has to be fixed. I don't really care anymore, except that it does get fixed. But why this particular scale? And the answer is twofold. On one hand, it is a sense of ambition, right? Britain needs, I think, and civil servants will rightly so reel away from anyone going, oh, this is another grand projet, right? That's the last thing they want. They want practical stuff. But nevertheless, if we'd said, look, we're going to build a new town, we would not have attracted the hundreds and thousands of people who now support this, and the scores of people who've actually put in, months of work for free to make this happen, right? They're area experts in water and transport and housing, etc., and they have dedicated their time to making this happen because they want something big. They want Britain to be back on the world stage and everyone to know this is a place where big things happen once again. The other half of the equation is actually, if you don't have that scale, it doesn't come together, right? So, I'll take it from the NIMBY perspective. What did I spent a long time, 3-4 years, just talking to NIMBYs, trying to figure out, well, why do they want houses? And they come up with 3 things, and they're dead right. Yeah. What are those 3 things? Their homes are ugly, right? They never come with any infrastructure, and when they are built, they're just as expensive as anywhere else. So, what housing problem are you solving here? So they're totally right. Now, if you want basically nature, homes, infrastructure, and you want those 3 things to kind of come together, and you want a bit of commercial land as well thrown in. Yeah. So it's actually now 4 things. If you want those 4 things to come together, they only work at the end of the day at scale, right? So you need to pay for this whole thing to wash its face, because then someone will start taking you, i.e. the government, might start taking you seriously. You go, okay, well, if this is sort of overall revenue neutral, and then we get a bunch of growth off the back of it, so it pays for itself, then okay, let's talk. So that's got to be a necessary precursor, because you don't want to say, well, it's going to cost, we'll need 200 billion to make this work. Well, yeah, fine, you get laughed out the door. So you need the scale, because you need enough nature, you need enough homes, and then of course you need enough commercial space, and then of course you need a certain amount, what economists call agglomeration factor, right? So it needs to be, therefore, it's already now a city, that's what you're talking about, right? So it's also why, for example, take Cambridge. The price to earnings ratio in Cambridge is 11 times. What does that mean in simple English? No one can afford a house, right? Who's actually, under 40. If you earn a great wage, and you can earn great wages in Cambridge, you just can't afford a family home to raise kids in. That seems like an obvious precursor to a healthy society. Can't happen. So people move out far away, etc. So you can see the demand is there, but Cambridge can't build any more homes, right? Why? Well, one of its main problems, it's got 2 main problems. One of its main problems is water. Okay, well, now we've got to build a reservoir. Now, if you're a normal developer trying to build 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 homes, fine, that's great. But you can't, because you've got to build a reservoir with it. Now, that small size scheme won't give you enough to say, let's spend 2.5 billion on a reservoir as well. So you've got to think about, okay, well, now we need a whole system solution. What about the railway? Well, if you're going to build 3,000 homes, it's never going to pay for a whole railway. So what are you going to do? So you need these things to come together. And then you realise, okay, well, this is just the obvious solution. You build a city. And the question is, how big a city? 500,000? Is it a million? There you go. That's it. We launched this on October the 23rd. And we'd done some work beforehand. I'd worked for about 4 or 5 years on the general conception of how this would work, because it's not a normal city in that sense either. There's an invisible fabric, economically speaking, and we can come to that. The community land trust homes, how do you do all of that stuff? It's actually it's a kind of municipal city. So it's a city that kind of owns itself in many ways, or attempts to, and that's a late Victorian conception that was incredibly successful, behind the success of almost every British city, including London, with the City of London. So let's kind of leave that there. But from late October till now, we already set ourselves this first milestone, which is, can we produce a really great knowledge base, and can we draw in the right stakeholders? I mean, it's kind of a bit of a no-brainer. That's what you do. So we've managed now, about a month ago, to finally hand in a big report to government. Which is 300 pages long, and it covers off all the kind of existential questions, right? Mm-hmm. So is it possible at all to even conceive of building a city? Not how we're going to do it, not the minor details, or the fine-grained detail, I should say, because that would be impossible for an unfunded group. We funded ourselves with about £4,000 or £5,000. That's it. It's just me and Joe putting in the rest of our savings, and we've asked no one else for money at this point. And I think we've kind of got that far. So we've achieved that, we've published it, we've handed it to government, to MHCLG specifically. Yeah. And we've now obviously published the public version of that as well. We've also worked with those stakeholders, crucially. Let's start with the landowners. And because you're not going to get very far unless you have some kind of form of control or ownership of the land. So we've already had one who's come out publicly and said that they support this and are willing to kind of agree to our options terms, and we've spoken to almost everyone else in that area. And this plot is blessed, if you want, from our perspective, by basically being agglomerated already. 80% thereabouts is already owned by just 10 landowners. So it's a big plot of 45,000 acres, which if you kind of put it over London in a perfect circle, is about the size of, it stretches from Hampstead in North London to Dulwich in South London. Right. And about 2 million people live in that circle. Okay. So it's a big land area. We can get into exactly what the city is. So that was the knowledge base. Producing that report was really important, and being able to then talk about this and put sort of flesh on the bone of what this conception was. And then the other part was obviously the stakeholders, and we talked about the landowners, but then we put together an amazing advisory board with some really big hitters. Yeah. And they've been astonishing at just batting. I've been in those meetings where I'm the quiet one, and you can see how much I can talk, and they're the ones kind of bullying the other side of the table and hammering into them and going, this needs to be done.
Right. You got, Dame Patricia Hewitt and my old mucker, Jackie Sadek, who I've known for many years. She has described herself to me previously as strong medicine, and I think that's very apt, but I love her to bits.
I describe her as our Exocet missile, so it's sort of, but with unlimited ammunition, it would seem. She is absolutely brilliant, fierce, and everyone in the development world obviously knows who she is, and if they don't, they soon do.
Yes.
And then, of course, there's Steve McAdam, who is, he was the master planner behind King's Cross and Olympics, basically our biggest development projects in this country for a generation. And to have some people like that, and Paul Johnson, of course, formerly of the IFS, and people don't argue with him when it comes to economics. So
he has got that air, hasn't he?
Yeah,
authoritative air.
Exactly, and for good measure, we've got Tim Lunig, another economist, just in case Paul all sort of fails at his core mission. So it's a great team. It's really, the advisory board is astonishing. And these people are absolutely fully behind this and understand exactly what we're doing and want it to succeed, right? There's no other reason why they're doing it. And it's incredibly humbling to have them batting for us and for Forest City as a project. So obviously, the last part of that is I've spent a long time talking to pretty much as many people as possible. It's still not enough. Then we reached a lovely tipping point, which is that 4 or 5 months ago, everyone would be, who are you? We're not picking up the phone, and we won't respond to your emails. Now they're like, why haven't you arranged a meeting with us already? You're very rude, Mr. Malik. So
what?
Yes, same people, just kind of it's flipped. So it's a really good sign. It's a really good. It is. It's a really good sign.
I mean, you mentioned Letchworth, and that's a place, having been, the feel is so incredibly different. And I think this you are sort of rediscovering and updating, and you talk about that a lot. As you say, a very British English tradition of municipalism. And the only reason I can see, beyond the confines of the legal system, and that can be changed, is that we're just doing things, we've been doing them for the past umpteen years simply because that's what we've been doing and it's nice and it's easy. And I think you are really right to pose those questions and offer those really, I don't want to use the word radical, because if we've done this before, it's not radical per se. No. It's just challenging to.
Well, I should say Ebenezer Howard was a journalist.
Yeah.
The good person who conceived of and built Letchworth Garden City. So it's worth keeping that in mind, right? So I feel like I'm in good company, right? Because we're both journalists. He screwed that up legally, and it was only corrected in, I think, 1965 ultimately. So you could actually, the city could control its own housing in that way and make the citizens and the future residents beneficiaries of the land value uplift. So you've got to get it right to start with, and you can't unwind it later. It's really, really painful to do it much later when everyone knows it's valuable, right? So this is why we have to do this right from the start. It's worth sort of zooming out for a second and going, okay, look, this city would generate around 53 billion in gross value added, right? It doesn't really mean much to most people, that number, but it's a very big number. Nonetheless, I think most people would say that. And it's effectively the combined output of Leeds, Oxford and Cambridge, right? Stick it all together and you just about reach what we would output in Forest City in the future, right? Once it's fully full built out. And that is life-changing for the people who live there, life-changing for the people who would be in the region. It's completely transformatory for the east of England. Why? Because it makes those business cases for all those investments that currently don't work. If you add in more people and more value, and suddenly those schemes go, the Treasury goes, fine, that's a sensible business case. Yeah. So whether it's Ely Hawley Junction upgrade, which actually makes sense anyway on its own, but still isn't done. No, or you're working to attract outside investment internationally because you've got X, Y, or Z development, or looking at the regional and strategic importance of Felixstowe. All of these things start to make a lot more sense when you have a new economic anchor in the east of England. So that's the kind of big picture. Now, take it to answer your question more directly. I'll answer it with maybe just a quick story, which is, in a sense, the villages and even Haverhill have failed on their own terms, right? Why exactly have they failed? Because they can't keep their own kids. Yeah. Their own children are leaving because they can't afford to live there anymore. And that is a constant story I hear. It turns out, from Haverhill especially, there's plenty of 20, 29, 30-year-olds I've spoken to who said I had to leave the place of where I was born. So in that sense, there's a correction that needs to happen on that basis. But on the other side, people have made life plans to say, I have retired in this area and I'm going to be here for 20 years and I don't want it to be a building site. I love living in a rural area and I don't want more people here because they'll ruin it. Just more people means it's ruined. But more than that, city life is not what I want. So, and there is no compensating for that at the end of the day, right? It's just a choice that people have made, and it's a lifestyle choice that living in a city just can't in any way really replicate. And there's no kind of, greenwashing or washing it in any kind of way or kind of clever words that's going to mask that fact. It's just a case. Now, pretty much all around the world, more people choose to live in a city than in rural areas, which is why houses in cities are far more expensive than in rural areas. So from a democratic perspective, you could say, well, fine, if cities need to expand and you can't do it via the green belts, and this is the way that you do it. This is the way that you do it.
My thanks to Shiv for his time and the National Trust's lovely people at Hatfield Forest. They weren't expecting us or anything, we just had a lovely time. I also want to thank, in particular, Suffolk County Councillor Bobby Bennett, whom I've known for years and with whom I had a grown-up, friendly and respectful exchange of views on Forest City 1 over coffee. We listened to each other, agreed to disagree agreeably, and we parted as friends. You see, it can be done. And so, in that spirit, I bring you this week's Action Points.
Action Points! Action Points! Action Points!
Here we go.
One.
Look at the proposal with an open mind. Well, since you're here, you've done that already.
2.
Consider the potential benefits as well as any potential drawbacks.
3.
Identify the ideas within the proposal that you think have value. How can we bring these ideas into existing places and new towns?
4.
Remember this. If Forest City 1 goes no further, that doesn't mean that the status quo has been preserved. No, it means the choice has been made for change of a different sort, which will have impacts and consequences of its own.
5.
Eastern Promise holds no brief for Shiv, Joe or anyone associated with Forest City 1. I do think that Forest City 1 is a bold proposal to solve an incredibly serious problem. And that's the point. It's a solution. So look at Forest City 1 again and ask yourself this one simple question. If not this, then what?
Thank you.
And that's it. That's all there is for this episode 178 of the Eastern Promise podcast. I have been Mike Rigby, and I will be so again very soon for our final episode before our summer hiatus. Brace yourselves for a big summer blowout in episode 179 from the Watatunga Wildlife Reserve. Join me and Reserve Manager Molly Ruder as we get out into the park and share some of the mystery, wildness and wonder of some of the world's greatest antelopes and ungulates ever. Just in time for the holidays, so get your little ones ready for this spectacular safari. Until then, bye for now. To hear other episodes of the Eastern Promise podcast and to find out more about what we do, go to our website at easternpromise.org.uk. Eastern Promise is a Pudding Shed production in proud association with Mills and Reeve. Achieving more together.